Hi, and welcome back to the Division of Education, Innovation and Energy's e-learning program. I am Mr. Atwell, and today we're continuing with consumer arithmetic. The last time we were here, we were looking at these various topics, and we would have covered them, we would have practice questions, and we would have also had multiple choice practice on these particular topics. So if you didn't get to see those videos, please go back and look for them. They'll be very helpful. However, today's lesson, we want to begin to focus on interest. And we're going to start with the fundamentals so that we can build on them going forward. So today's lesson, at the end of this lesson, we are hoping, and I'm hoping, that you will be able to define terms associated with simple interest, to know the formula associated with the simple interest, and to solve problems involving simple interest. You ready? Let's start. The first thing that we need to be able to talk about is interest itself. And sometimes when we talk about a mathematical standpoint, interest seems to, kind of give us a little bit of issue. But we know about interest, right? Because we've all had that friend. You go and ask them, hey, lend me $10 now. And then what they tell you? I'm going to lend you $10. But when I give back money, I give back a little bit something. I give me something more. I give back 11. I give back 12. You know what they're doing? They are charging you interest. And that's exactly what interest is. Interest is that amount or that sum paid for the use of money. So, if you want to use money that you don't have and you borrow it, then the lender may charge you an additional amount so that you could use their money. Similarly, when we deposit money into the bank, we are giving the bank the right to use our money so that they can make money. Yeah? Which is why banks are supposed to give you interest on the amount that you deposit. So interest is the fee for borrowing money or other assets. And what is important, and one thing I want you to note, is that financial institutions pay interest to customers who deposit money. Because when you deposit money, then the bank has that money to lend other customers money so that they can get interest from those customers and then give you some of the interest that they get from those customers. Yeah? That's the whole thing. Interest is all about money or the sum paid for using money. So if you want to use it, it means that you will have to pay interest. Or if you are letting someone else use it, then they are the ones to pay interest. You understand that? It's an important concept to get. But understand that all interest is that additional amount of money that is obtained or must be paid for using it. Now, what's another important word when it comes to simple interest? Is this word, principal. Yeah? And no, we're not talking about the principal of a high school. What we're talking about here is the initial amount that you borrowed, or the sum of the money that you borrowed, or the sum of the money that you invested. Remember, interest can go both ways. It is either you have to pay it when you borrow money, or you will get it when you invest money. So either if you're taking the money, you will have to pay interest. And if you're investing the money, you will get interest. So just remember that. But the principle is how much you either took initially or gave. Yeah? The amount of interest one gets or has to pay usually depends on the principal amount. Now, for example, if I say, I'm going to lend you $10, you give me back $1. Yeah? If you then come and ask me to borrow $100, you really think I should only charge you an interest of $1? No. We had to keep the ratio the same, right? So if I lend you $10 and I had to give me back 11, if you ask me for $100 and I lend you, how much is you supposed to give me back? Now 110? Then that is generally what happens. Because interest is not a fixed amount. Interest is not like a fixed value. It's not going to be $1 or $2 or $5 or $10. Well, what you're going to realize is more times than not, interest will be as a percentage of the principal amount. That's how banks work. That's how other financial institutions work. Your interest is always the percentage of your amount. So let's continue. So far we've met two words. What we've met? We've met interest. That's the extra you get for either, for lending money or extra you had to pay for borrowing money. And the principal, the initial amount you would have loaned or borrowed. Now let's look at this example to make sure we understand those two words. So Jim borrowed $10 from Tim. And Tim told Jim that he had to pay $1 interest when he was paying back the money to him. Well, first thing I want to know, how much is the principal amount? I know it kind of rhymey, but let's think about it, right? So Jim borrowed $10 from Tim, all right? So Tim is the one lending the money here. What was the principal amount? What was the initial amount that Jim borrowed from Tim? Well, according to the question, that's $10. So the principal is $10. What was the interest that Tim received, when Jim paid him? Well, Tim told Jim that he had to pay him $1 interest. So it means that when Jim paid Tim, he paid $1 interest. So what was the total amount of money that Jim paid to Tim? Well, let's think about it. It wouldn't be $1. Because if you lend somebody $5 and they only pay you back $1, you will dog them for your money. If you lend them at $20, you will dog them for their money until they pay back all with the interest. So we already know that the total amount could never just be the interest alone. They must pay back the amount they borrowed plus whatever interest you're charged. So in all, Jim had to pay Tim $11. And that's exactly what happens on larger scales when it comes to other financial institutions. When we borrow money, we get to use that money. However, when we're paying back, we must pay back with interest. So the total amount we end up paying back will always be more than the initial amount we borrowed, because there is always going to be interest added when it comes to borrowing money. Similarly, when we're investing our money, we expect that as time goes along, the amount of money that we will get back will be worth more than the amount we put in. If we get less than the amount we put in, then what's going on there? We're not getting any interest. Our money is actually being wasted. We're losing money. So it's important that we be able to check and to know whether or not our interest amount is worth our investment. Let's continue. How about this one? Jim borrowed $20 from Tim. So Jim come back again and borrowing more money. And Tim told Jim that he had to pay 10% interest when he was paying back the money to him. Again, what was the principal amount? The principal amount was the initial amount that was borrowed, so that would be the $20. What was the interest that Tim received when Jim paid him? Well, the interest was 10%, which means that Jim had to pay Tim 10% of the principal amount as interest. So that means that he had to pay 10% of the principal amount. Now, what did we say about 10%? It's just as dividing by 10. So 20 divided by 10 is $2. What's the total amount that Jim had to pay? He had to pay back all the money he borrowed plus the interest. So in all, he paid $22. And regardless of how big or small it gets, this is the basis and this is the foundation that you must understand. And when it comes to amount being paid back or amount you're going to receive, it's always going to be the initial amount plus the interest. Yeah? So an interest is always going to be some percentage or some fraction of the principal. Those are key things to understand. But now let's make it just a little bit more interesting. So let's talk about now the interest rate. We spoke about interest, talking about the sum of the money you would get, when you invest money, or the sum of the money you have to pay back, the additional money you have to pay back when you borrow money. But when it comes to the interest rate, is the amount a lender charges for the use of the money or whatever assets, usually expressed as a percentage of the principal. And interest rates are usually, not all the time, but usually based on an annual rate, which means on a yearly percentage. So if I tell you that your interest rate, which we're going to represent by a capital R, is 15%, it means that for that particular institution, more than likely, if you were to borrow money from that institution, you would have to pay 15% of whatever or how much ever you borrowed per year. Now think about it. It's per year, right? So let's say you went into an institution and you borrowed $10,000. Yeah? And the interest rate was 15% per annum, or per year, or annually. All of those mean the same thing. Then, at the end of 1 year, we would expect that the amount of interest this would have accrued would be 15% of the total. Book. Which would be $1,500, right? That's 1 year. But suppose it took you 2 years to pay it off. What would be the total interest? Well, 1 year is 15%. Another year would be another 15%, which will make your total interest for 2 years how much? $3,000. So, more interest is paid the longest you have to pay something. So the more time you have to pay off a particular item or a particular loan is the more interest that will be required, which makes sense. Because if you're lending money, right, and you're telling people, here's what, I'm going to give you a good bit of time, I'm going to give you 5 years to pay me back my $500, then you would want to ensure that the amount of money you get after those 5 years is worth giving the person the $500 today. Now, what do I mean by that? Think about it. 5 years ago, what you could have purchased with $100, you can't purchase it for today. Why? Because of inflation. As time goes along, the cost of goods go up. The cost of living goes up. The value of a $100 bill goes down. So if I say I'm going to lend you $500 today, in 5 years from now, that $500 won't be able to do the same thing as it can do today. So I have to ensure that when that 5 years come, the amount of money that you give me back will be able to do the same thing I can do today, plus a little bit more. And that's what interest is supposed to be all about. I say supposed to be. Interest is supposed to be ensuring that, one, the value of the money you are investing now does not go below what it is currently. You should always be able to do the same thing or more when you invest. If your investment, listen to me very carefully, I teach you a little bit of knowledge here, right? You're not on the board, but make sure you understand this. If the money you invest now could do more than the money you would get out at the end, that is a waste of an investment. You hear me? If the money that you're investing now could do more than the money you're going to get out at the end, or whatever you're going to get out at the end, it is a waste of investment. Please bear that in mind. You always want to ensure that your amount returning to you is able to do more than it can do now. And then that will be a good investment. Let's continue. Because time is a very important thing when it comes to investment. Now, before that, let me just go back a bit to talk about this. Interest rates. Now, yes, it's usually an annual basis, but it can be a monthly basis, a weekly basis, a daily basis, a fortnightly basis. It all depends on your time period. And that's why we have to look at our time period. Because our time period refers to the specific number of periods for borrowing, from borrowing to paying back. Now, we can have daily time periods, we can have weekly time periods, we can have fortnightly time periods, monthly time periods, quarterly time periods, biannually, annually, biennially, and so on and so forth. What is important to note is that the interest rate must be within the same time period. So if you have an annual interest rate, but we're talking about a daily time period, we can't use those together. We must convert one to be to the other. Our interest rate must be in the same time period. That's important. So if we're talking about 4% per month, then we must be looking at a monthly time period. If we're talking about 12% per year, then we must be looking at a yearly time period. Now, when it comes to simple interest, it's kind of nice, right? Because if we're talking about, let's say, for example, we're talking about 12% per year, right? So you want that at the end of the year, you get 12%. What does that mean when it comes to per month? Well, how many months are there in a year? 12 months, right? So if you want 12% at the end of the year, it means that you want 1% at the end of each month. So we're able to convert between the rates in different time periods. But what is key is that your rate must be measuring in the same time period as your time. Let's move on. And let's see if we can understand as we go forward. So again, some keywords: principal, interest, interest rate, and the time. So when it comes to interest, there are two types. There's simple interest and compound interest. Now, compound interest will stay for another time. Let's focus on the simpler one for now. Simple interest. And what simple interest is all about? It's about that interest that is calculated based on the principal only. Right? It's based on that initial portion of a loan or investment. So if you borrowed 30,000, it's always going to be based on that 30,000. If you loaned 5,000 for simple interest, it's going to be based on the 5,000. If you borrowed $10, it's going to always be based on that $10. Simple interest is never applied to interest gained or interest owing. Now, what I mean by that? So let's say you borrowed $100 and you had 5 months to pay it back. So you had to pay back that $100 within 5 months. Yeah? So you have 5 months to pay it back. So you have month 1, month 2, month 3, month 4, month 5. Yeah? Now, that's simple, right? So if you say you have $100 and you're going to pay back your $100 in 5 months, then you know, well, that's easy, or I pay is $20 a month. That's what we could say, right? All we had to pay is $20 a month. That's if there was no such thing as interest. Now, let us say that the interest rate, however, the interest rate was 10% per month. So in addition to paying off the principal, you had to pay 10% interest per month, simple interest. Well, This 10% is going to be based on your principal. Now, I want you to see something. When you pay that 10%, so we have to add that 10% to this. So 10% of 100 is $10. Yeah? So it means then that we have to pay an additional 10% as interest, $10, sorry, as interest per month. So in all, we end up paying $30 a month. Similarly here, because it's based on the principal, right? For simple interest, it's based on the principal. It will be another $30 here. And similarly, coming down, we end up paying $30 here. Now, how much money did we end up paying in all? We ended up paying $150. Yeah? How much interest did we end up paying in all? We ended up paying $50 in interest. You're seeing what I'm talking about, right? So, this is how much we paid on the principal. This is how much interest we paid. And then this was the total amount. And that's important for you to remember. Now, if you paid off the amount in 2 months, yeah? If you paid off the entire $100 in 2 months, well, you say, watch me, I'm going to pay it off in 2 months. So you know what I'm going to do? $50 1 month, $50 next month. Yeah? You still have to pay a 10% interest. So a 10% interest would be a $10. 10. But now, instead of paying a total of $150, you end up paying a total of $120. So I will always encourage you, if you can, pay off your loans earlier. The faster you pay off a loan, is the less money you have to pay. That goes across the board. Yes? Some banks may not tell you, some institutions may not tell you, but go and pay off your principals as fast as you can so that you will reduce your overall amount that you will have to pay on a loan.